Okay, we're going to call and get this show on the road. I'm Andrew Guido from Empire Homes, and I have the privilege, thank you. I have the privilege and honor of introducing an incredible powerhouse cast of speakers to talk about virtual power plants. This is really an exciting topic, because I actually think that what we're going to be talking about is going to be the future. It's the way to avoid nuclear plants, is what I'm really hoping. And so we have four contributors here. We've got Megan Cordes from Beazer Homes. We've got Joel Abney from SH Residential Homes. And then from Sunrun, we've got Matt Brost and Chip Silverman that are going to be contributing. I'm going to pass it over to Matt, that's going to lead the session. And
Thank you.
This is where I disappear.
Okay, you're going to go play now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
In the room or out of the room? Thanks for coming in, everybody. Super glad to be on stage and talking about VPP today, virtual power plants. My name's Matt Brost. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Sunrun for the New Homes Division. Sunrun is, we like to call ourselves America's clean energy company. We're in the majority of the US states. We serve all residential customers, existing home and new homes. And we are a battery first company. So we used to be a solar company, but we really refer to ourselves now as a battery first. To give you an example of that, about 85% of the systems that we install in California today include a battery, and about 60% nationwide. We believe there are a lot of benefits that come with owning a battery and owning a home that has a battery in it that go beyond just energy savings, cost savings, resiliency in the homes, but also benefits to the grid. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We installed 75,000 batteries last year in homes, and this year we're on track to sell over 100,000 batteries in a 12-month period. So you can imagine the demand growth is very large. And the benefits when you collectively combine these together can be huge. And so I'm going to ask Chip to give everybody here an overview. Chip, you're the Senior Director of Grid Resiliency. Give me your title.
So Grid Services and Virtual Power Plants.
Thank you. I hammered that one. So we've got a few slides to go through. Wanted to ground the audience on what we're talking about today, and then we'll go to some questions to some of our panelists.
Great. Let's get the elephant out of the room right now. Does anybody actually know what a virtual power plant is? Anybody? Okay, that's great. So the idea of a virtual power plant is that it can perform the same services as a centralized power plant, except that each of the homes, in this case, right, make up a small piece of that power plant, right? So if every home has a battery, collectively, you can control all of those batteries via software and then dispatch it to the grid just like a large-scale power plant would. Now, I like to say that there's nothing virtual about a virtual power plant, right? So sometimes at Sunrun, we call it a distributed power plant. Personally, I think that is going to take the industry by storm, but I'm still waiting, so we'll see when it happens. But you know, that is the benefit, and everybody benefits with virtual power plants. And finally, I've been doing this for about 12 years now. Finally, we are starting to see this come to scale and recognition from all stakeholders that virtual power plants can be a solution to the challenges that face the electric grid today. A solution is very important, right? I'm not up here telling you that this is snake oil, right? It's not the only solution. But what virtual power plants can offer is peaking capacity, right? That is highly needed by the grid. And so the holy grail, I think, here is if you're a home builder and you're building a, say, 500 home community, when you go to the utility and you say, hey, I need a 5 megawatt interconnection, if instead of that, if you could go to the utility and say, hey, my peak demand was 5 megawatts, but I'm going to install 1 or maybe even 2 batteries at each one of these homes, and we're going to be able to control it centrally and dispatch it during the evening peak or perhaps the morning peak when that happens every day, and we're going to guarantee that the demand of this community is never going to exceed 3 megawatts, let's say, right? So you are reducing your peak demand by almost 40%. That is extremely valuable to a utility. There's a financial value associated with that, with not having to build out the grid infrastructure. There's a financial value associated with not having to wait years for a new substation to come online, right? With not having to build a new peaking power plant. Turbine for that power plant could take 5 years to just be in stock, right? So the utility benefits from this, but also the home builder does, right? Quicker time to build, energize the community. You can sell your homes more quickly, right? The homeowner benefits immensely as well. The homeowner gets resiliency with the battery. They get customer choice. They get the ability to control their pity, right? They can reduce their operating costs by having the battery. Then you have a company like Sunrun. We can manage that battery. We can manage the power plant centrally via our software. And we can provide the grid with a reliable power plant that's also clean. Matt?
Great explanation. Yeah, and I'm going to go to Joel, and then maybe we'll come back to a slide or two. But in Sekisui House, Joel, you guys have started using quite a bit of batteries. And I know you're working with the utilities and trying to, the utility patchwork, I guess, of trying to work out programs and understand how the batteries will fit into the communities that you're doing, because it's still relatively a little bit new. I'm curious to what level, like as you've talked to utilities and you're adding batteries, what does grid reliability, how does that play into your decision making or your thoughts about your strategy at Sekisui House?
Yeah, Matt, it's a really interesting question, and I think it's important to realize that as we've been incorporating more batteries, it's been really more on a lifestyle solution resilience approach rather than a cost savings approach, and it's really how you introduce the concept to the customers and also to the utility. So as we started working with utilities, we had a good debate as we were prepping for this about, well, how many programs can you apply across an entire state? And there are some statewide programs, but what we're finding is the requirement is working directly with that utility and understanding what their capacity is and what their specific requirements for net metering is, all of those pieces as we design. And we have to engage them well ahead of the project to be able to get some of those designs into place. To the specifics of your question, though, is we have to consider not just the current performance of the grid today when we're keeping the customer front of mind. We also have to consider the long-term impacts of the demand on the energy grid. And so how do we create a resilient long-term solution for our customers based on where they live and what they're going to experience? And so, building in a battery as a base, included feature for some of our brands is really critical, but also offering the ability to put in extra batteries for a resiliency type of approach gives us the ability to say, look, maybe the grid's super stable today in this one utility, but if we add 4 data centers in the next 5 years in this area, the demand exceeds the ability for the utility to keep up. We have a solution at the home level that allows the customer to navigate through all those, but still keeping the utilities as a stakeholder, which is really critical. You have to keep them as a stakeholder and involved in the discussion.
Yeah, that's helpful. And we were talking, and I think we've already said in here, builders aren't adding batteries to homes because it's primarily for grid services. I mean, it's primarily because of resiliency, and particularly in California where we're doing most, it's cost reduction, bill reduction, and resiliency. Those two, and then we have a number of the other benefits that we get to tout. And so I'll take it to Megan, because Megan, Beazer, huge commitment, net zero energy everywhere in the country. You're adding solar in a lot of, a significant portion of the country to bring those bills down, but haven't really gotten into batteries much. And I'm curious, how do you see all of those benefits along with, what we've been talking about with grid services impacting or influencing Beazer's decision making down the road? What needs to happen for Beazer to build more homes with batteries?
Yeah, so I think that, yes, we have this big commitment, and it's called it was called Zero Energy Ready. I think as a result of that, you think, okay, it's ready, what's next? And so the natural progression, aside from any grid issues, is, okay, if it's zero energy ready, we add renewables, and that gets us to zero energy. And with renewables, storage just makes sense. We really don't want to install a bunch of solar with no storage because it leads to bad customer outcomes. They're not as happy as they would be. They think solar, they think energy independence, and without storage, you're not operating in an outage, you're not operating at night. So I think our natural progression is towards storage. We tend to, we made this big commitment to zero energy ready. We went all in across the country, all 17 divisions, all 12 states. And the next step in that is getting solar across the board. Where we're offering solar, a lot of times we're also offering storage as an option, trying to figure out how to demonstrate the value to our buyers. So I think that that's where the grid comes in. I think a lot of the value to storage that we can include in our messaging as we include more storage in our homes is, look, your utility rates are going to go up. There's all the things that Joel talked about that we should consider, and the more people see that, the more we have the ability to talk to them about it and show them the value proposition of storage plus solar. And so that's, I think, where we need to get to.
Yeah, and you didn't mention the other elephant in the room, the cost.
I did not mention the cost. I didn't know. Batteries are expensive. So yeah, I mean, there is the cost of it, and I think a lot of what we've done with Zero Energy Ready is figure out how to build a better home. It's gonna cost more, and how do we talk about that to our buyers? So I think we need to find the sweet spot where storage pricing comes down and buyer awareness goes up, and we're able to really demonstrate that value with the home as a system. And I don't think that's far off.
Yeah, no, I agree. And maybe, so to address the cost component, I have maybe Chip, you can go to your slide with you showed the event that we ran in California.
Sure.
Because so from a cost perspective, battery costs are going to be coming down significantly over the next several years. And through scale of deployment, we can further take costs down. Through working with jurisdictions and improving permitting, we can take costs down. So there's a lot of opportunities to drive costs down, but one of the other opportunities is to actually innovate and implement these VPP programs. And so we have a program in California. I think about 75,000 batteries or so participate in that.
It's actually almost double that now.
Okay, 150, yeah, that was
amazing,
two
right?
weeks ago. Yeah. So can you share a little bit about how that program works? And I think you have a slide on that, right?
Yeah, we do. Can we jump back to the slides? I see us on the projector still.
Is that in the back there? There we go.
There we go. Great. So this conversation here was great. And before I talk about like the California program, which is very exciting, right? I just want to say, as you heard Matt and I saying before, Sunrun is managing almost 200,000 batteries right now. The majority of those are enrolled in grid services, virtual power plant, distributed power plant, whatever you want to call them. They're in these programs supporting the grid. And in exchange for that, we are sending millions, literally millions of dollars a year. My team is responsible for cutting the individual checks and getting everybody paid. We're sending that to homeowners. Homeowners are making hundreds of dollars every year. It does vary across the country, program to program, state to state, utility to utility, but generally it's several $100s per year just to make their battery available to the grid if the grid needs it. And it doesn't always need it, right? Matt was talking about our program in California. I mentioned in my remarks at the beginning that after 10, 12 years in this industry, it's exciting to see that our impact is finally being recognized. What you see on the screen here is a graph of California's net load from CAISO. This is data that comes directly from the grid manager in California. And what you can see is that when we dispatched our distributed virtual power plant from 7 to 9 p.m., this happened earlier this summer, we reduced the net load of California by almost 2%. 2%. That is about half of the city of San Francisco. In fact, we got a call from CAISO, and they were amazed at what happened. Nobody had ever seen this kind of scale from distributed resources before. So what you see on the graph, again, right, where it looks like somebody took a bite out of the top of the mountain, that is because all 150,000 almost, 130,000 batteries were dispatched at the same time. When those batteries dispatched, they first reduce home load. So if the home is running, say, air conditioning, right, they're charging their vehicle, running their washer, dryer, whatever it may be, those things are covered first by the batteries discharging. And then any additional energy that's available beyond that can be exported to the grid, and homeowners are compensated for both of those things, load reduction and grid exports. The really unique thing about batteries in this space is that even though home load is being reduced from the grid's perspective, there is no need for the customer to change any behavior, right? They keep their power. As Joel and I were talking about before, if somebody is having a pool party, right? That pool party is going to keep going on because the battery is going to be supporting it. Same thing if the grid goes out because of a blackout. The battery will kick in to support the home. So we don't see a compromise here between homeowner choice, right, choosing to have power themselves and helping out their neighbors and getting paid for doing that. We don't see that choice. When we dispatch homeowner batteries, they always have a choice about whether or not they want to participate. It comes to them in their Sunrun app or in the battery OEM app, depending on which battery they have. And it says, hey, there's a virtual power plant event coming up. You could earn, however much money that program pays. Do you want to participate? And they can choose, right? So we are preserving customer choice here. That's really important. Nobody is stepping in and taking anything from the homeowner. We're asking them to share and support the community.
So no inconvenience like other demand response programs that we've seen, which is great. So I'm going to bring this back to cost again and talk a little bit about the way we finance this in California and in other states. California we refer to a lot because obviously we have the solar mandate there. And we also have net metering 3, which really changed the dynamic in California on how systems and these pay for themselves and save homeowners money. And it's very challenging in California to save a homeowner money now without a battery. But we're also launching these programs in many other states, and Texas is sort of like going to be the next frontier, I believe, as we do that. And it's through these programs with power purchase agreements where for no cost to the builder, we can provide large solar systems, we can provide 1 to 2 batteries, we can provide span in the home for ultimate control of the home, and we can do all this for less than the utility cost. So there's definitely a path to making batteries affordable for homeowners in where the economics work, which is clearly something we have to go through. But I'm curious, my question comes back to both, maybe if you could both answer how you think about customer ownership versus like third-party ownership, the benefits of each, and what you see happening as we advance down this road.
So it's a really great question, and I will tell you in the past 2 years, my opinion on customer ownership versus third-party ownership has fluctuated based on the stability of the third-party ownership model with different companies. So, with solar integrators struggling financially, that's changed some of these dynamics. But really, what are we trying to accomplish with our customers is really what we have to always go back to, is what are we trying to provide for the customer? And what do they care about? They care about the stability, the system working long-term, and having a sense that it's going to be there for them throughout the entire warranty term or term of their lease. And so with purchase systems, there are some additional benefits that sometimes come from appraisals and those type of things. In some markets, you get a lease model and they don't include that as part of the appraisal, and so the value proposition changes for having those systems. But really, the ability of having the stability of a investor, being able to support that in the long run, even if there's a problem with the original integrator, that does help the customer in the long term. And so we find that when it's a balanced model, in our experience, customers are purchasing the system about 60% of the time when they have the choice between lease and purchase, or between a PPA and purchase. And how you roll it out at a community by community level also matters. What do you include as part of the base of the house versus what's, if you're in a full PPA to start with and then switch over to a purchase. So, and so to kind of bring it back to the answer to the question, being able to be flexible but always keeping the customers, what's the customer going to experience in the long term as the front of mind piece, allows us to use customizable approaches in each market. In some markets, it's going to make sense to have more of an ownership model. Some markets, it's going to make sense to have more of a PPA. For instance, in the state of Washington, can't have third-party ownership, so the entire conversation's moot. But
It's an easy choice there.
That's exactly right. So we still have to have both solutions at the table, is what I'm saying.
And the customer is the guiding light.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Can I just add really quickly that I think that is very consistent with at Sunrun how we look at virtual and distributed power plants, right? The entire reason that Sunrun has been able to become the largest residential distributed power plant company is because we have assets out there. Customers buy those assets, or they lease or have a PPA on those assets, the batteries, because they want resiliency, or they want utility bill management and cost savings, right? What we're offering here with virtual power plants is sort of icing on the cake, right? We can help to defray some of the costs of deploying the battery in the first place, right? But ultimately, the customer is choosing the battery because it benefits their lifestyle. It makes it more secure. It guarantees that the power is always going to be on, right? It helps them to have controllable operating costs of the house. So really, that's very consistent with what we see here, right? And virtual power plants, I think, will be an increasingly important part of that equation because they are going to provide some additional revenue and help to lower the cost. Thanks for letting me jump in. Megan?
So I agree with everything Joel said. I think those are all really, really great points, and I'm on the same page. I will add that we're offering storage as an option kind of across the U.S. We've got California, we've got some offerings in Texas, and then some of our East Coast divisions are offering storage as an option. And we just kind of went in on this year, and right now I'm in the process of gathering data, so I'm going to be really interested to see what it looks like, because I think storage is such a vital part of a good customer experience with solar that I really want buyers to select the option. So I think understanding what the take rate is and how that's going in the markets where we're just offering it as a purchase option is going to be really important to understand, because yes, a third-party ownership model would be a great alternative to just get things moving and see if we can make it work that way, because I really think it's going to be important to get storage as part of the picture in whatever way we can.
Yeah, some of you guys may have been in Sarah Gutterman's presentation the other day, and it seemed like from what I was hearing, really from boomers, you know, Gen X, millennials, like they all want this stuff. The question is, are you willing to pay for it? And one of the things I took away from there was total cost of ownership, right? And one of the things we're trying to demonstrate right now is that total cost of ownership is not the PPA that you sign, you know, with Sunrun. It's like, what is my total utility going to be at the end of the month? And I was really pleased finally to see that the consumer that's like kind of what they're saying and talking about and caring about. And to your point, I think that we can demonstrate when we show a residual utility bill and what you're getting here, and then it kind of comes back to that appraisal discussion. Like you're appraising things, but you don't get to count certain things that are going to the secondary benefits, if you will. And there are so many secondary benefits that I think it could throw it over the edge, but starting with total cost of ownership being lower. So I have batteries in my home and span, and I can tell you it's been like an absolute game changer. I could talk about it for the next 27 minutes, but I was actually interested in your guys' opinion, like feedback from your customers, and to the extent, Megan, you're looking into it, Joel, you have customers living in homes with batteries. What is the customer saying?
Provided you make it simple, it's an absolute benefit to the customer in every way. I mean, it's really the only time you get pushback from customers if you're including a battery and a solar system and renewable energy system. The only time you get pushback is if you make the backup power or what you put on the separate sub panel complicated. Then it's a little bit of a pushback. But frankly, when you can get the system right, and we've recently moved to a smart panel like Span and battery backup, and that combination gives the customer an unprecedented level of control of what they value. Not just they can preset things, but also they can just decide if the power is out, they have the ability to shut off a circuit on their own. There's some preset things that'll automatically do that for them, but if they decide to the point, the power's out, it's 7 o'clock on a Friday afternoon during the summer and I'm having a pool party, I can still have those circuits run, and I didn't have to pre-plan it way before when I was building the house or selecting the options of the house, and we can just make that easy. It's a game changer. And it's not a buying decision. I still have to make that point. No one is coming in and saying, well, I'm buying the house because of X, Y, Z. What it turns into is a confirmation of the right choice. I made a good investment here for all the reasons. We love the house, we love the location, and it also helps me on the financial side and frankly, how I live life as a customer. And that's a huge differentiator.
Yeah, the 2 points on that. The biggest complaints we get as a company are, one, I didn't get enough solar because they started using more energy as soon as they got a solar system, and I didn't get a battery. Why didn't anybody ask me about a battery? If you look at our data, it's unbelievable. That's where it comes from. And a lot of it is, my bill's higher than I thought because the residual bill that you didn't cover with the system design when you could have done it right the first time, the customer's surprised by that because they're not solar experts. And like second, coming back to your design, we're doing a lot of subdivision designs with batteries right now, and there's a lot of decision making developers have to go through. Do I do whole home backup? Do I do a backup panel? Do I put in a load management system like Span? And all of those things are cost decisions too, and other decisions like going into that. How does the consumer get educated on all these things? I mean, but once they are and they actually see the benefits of how it all works together, the beauty is it's pretty seamless. In your customer surveys as well as your customer, the amount of customer service calls and things like that can be dramatically reduced by just thinking it through and doing it right the first time. So with that, we're going to go to questions here in a minute, I think. But Chip, thinking about VPP in the future, like you've been doing this for 12 years, I didn't even know that. If you're in your 15th year, your 18th year, like what has changed? What do you expect people will be seeing in the market?
Yeah, a great question. I think, let's start with where we are right now. We are at the point now where every single utility in the country, and outside the country, frankly, can have a VPP, right? Our largest VPP is in California, right? Our second largest is way across the country, actually not even technically in the country, right? Puerto Rico. And they're vastly different use cases. In Puerto Rico, people buy solar and storage because the power grid is very unreliable. They have blackouts on a weekly basis, right? The VPP there is literally the last line of defense. It is the last resource that the utility can ask for power from before they have to start triggering rolling blackouts. And even there, people want to be in the VPP. Why? Because they get paid hundreds of dollars a year to do it. And for some of them who are a little more altruistic, they take a lot of pride in the fact that they're supporting the grid of their entire island, and they're helping keep the lights on for the entire island. Very different than California, let's say, where we've talked about a lot, where people are buying the battery in the first place, contracting for it, more for, personal resiliency in the unlikely event of a blackout, though it does happen in California, right? For bill management associated with NEM 3 and so forth. So that's where we are now. If Puerto Rico and California can both have utility scale VPPs on their grid, then any state, any utility can do it. That's where we are currently. So what do I look forward to in the next 10 years? Hopefully sooner, that dream will come true, right? That Sunrun will be managing nuclear power plant sized VPPs in more than just 2 states, right? We'll be managing them in 50 states, let's say. So that's one. How do I think we get there? Well, a couple things that really excite me. I'll give you 3, and then I'll pass the microphone again. One is electric vehicles. There's a lot of talk out there about bidirectional electric vehicles, also known as V2G or V2X, right? There's lots of different acronyms, but the idea is that an electric vehicle is a rolling battery that in some cases, on average, is about 10 times the size of a typical stationary battery. So the customer is buying this already for mobility, yet it's parked in their driveway over 90% of the year, right? So we can leverage that and add that into existing VPPs. We're already doing this at Sunrun through our partnership with Ford. We have F-150 Lightnings that have dispatched every day this summer in Maryland to support the grid and provide peak load reduction to the entire grid. So EV is super exciting. Another thing that I find really exciting, and again, I'm working on this right now at Sunrun in a partnership with PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric in Northern California, right, is a locational-based VPP. What does that mean? PG&E came to us and they identified a list of feeders on their grid, locations that were at or nearly at capacity. So they didn't have any more capacity, they couldn't support more load. But they came to us and other companies like Span and Tesla, who have a lot of assets deployed in California, and they said, can you coordinate the dispatch of all of your batteries, all of your Span panels, such that we can reduce the load on individual feeders at certain times of day, whenever we tell you. And by the way, sometimes we're only going to tell you a few minutes in advance of the need. And we're doing that today. It's incredible, right? And then the last thing is kind of more innovation around what a VPP does for a utility. Why do they want it, right? I think a great example of this is something that's going on in Texas, where the structure of the utility is a bit different than in a lot of the country, excuse me. But we're actually working with retail energy providers in Texas right now to integrate solar and storage from Sunrun, right into the customer's electric bill. So ideally, the customer sees one electricity bill. There's no need to try to compare 2 different bills to find out what the residual amount is. It's going to be one integrated offering. and retail energy providers in Texas are extremely excited about this. There's a whole host of reasons. I'm happy to go into it afterwards if anybody wants to nerd out on this. I do that a lot. But why don't I leave it with those three: EVs, new business models, and locational-based asset deferral.
You missed one of mine, which is putting batteries in every new home in the U.S. So I think I'll close with kind of coming back to Megan and Joel. Megan, so as the developer builder, there's an opportunity to grease the skids way in advance of the subdivision starting, right? To what extent are you willing, or would Beazer willing, to incorporate into your development planning discussions with the utility well in advance to say, we're willing to do this if we can monetize this and we can bring benefits to the grid? And I imagine you do this with other things. This is just a new thing where those conversations could be having. So I'm curious, what could Beazer do to help accomplish my dream?
How can I help you?
How can you help me? Yes.
I think you're right. That's something we do probably more than some other builders, just because we're building differently. We really have to get in with the people who are making the decisions, whether it's at the jurisdiction level or the utility level, to really help them understand how we're building and how we reduce demand already with our reduction in energy consumption, and how we build differently and why it helps everybody. And so I think that's a really important thing, is to do these things early and often and really engage all of the stakeholders, because we can't do this without their buy-in. And so, yeah, absolutely, we would 100% partner on something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And every part of the country is unique in the developer-builder stakeholder relationship. And so getting in and being able to pre-plan and share strategies with policymakers and decision makers and utility planning matters. And so it's, we have to we have to start to engage those groups well ahead of time in order to move the ball forward on some of these things. Because we're all here just to make Matt's dreams come true.
Absolutely,
so
100%.
That's what but all joking aside, really, that's got to be the step that we take forward, is like, yes, we need to engage those groups ahead of time and start to plan out what it looks like in 3 and 5 and 10 years and be part of those conversations, because in all cases where industry and policy actually communicates and talks, you have a better outcome than each one talking in its own silo or echo chamber. And what happens is, in those situations, we don't have solutions. We just have fights over what the right answer is going to be.
And I think that the more thoughtful we are about it, the more forward-thinking we are. When I used to work for a utility, so I have a unique perspective on this, but utilities don't necessarily understand all the implications of the things that they're doing. And so if we come at them and say, here's what we thought through, here's where we find impediments, and here's what we suggest that you could do to help move this along in a way that benefits you and me, I think doing that early is supremely helpful in getting through any of these initiatives. And so I think whatever we can do there would be great.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe, as we talked about earlier, getting it incorporated into HERS, right? So we can start counting some of the carbon reduction initiatives.
Yeah. We talked about this in our pre-session about how including the battery in the calculation for the HERS score. And I just mentioned the current state causes my eye to start twitching, and the fact that we can't plan out for what is the actual energy performance of this house going to be when we include a battery in it today with the current policies and calculation methods. Requires us, as we start planning longer term, to have a separate calculation to need to do that and do it on our own and not have it be part of the system. And I know that there's groups working on this, but the current situation today can get very frustrating because you can't include the battery as a part of the long-term performance of that house. So
Yeah, and obviously we'd love to see it as an IECC option, right? Not a mandate, but it's just an option to other energy efficiency measures, battery storage, and all that will hopefully also help us accomplish your dreams, Chip, someday. So I think we're at 20 minutes left, leaving a few minutes for questions. If there are any, we'll open it up. And I can't see.
Hi, I'm Sarah Witter from the Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. Great session, thank you. I really appreciate the focus on the customer experience and simplicity. And in this session, we've talked a lot about batteries and solar, but from a customer perspective, there's a lot of demand-side utility programs that they're potentially having to enroll with. We talked about EVs and water heaters, smart thermostats are all out there, different levels of sophistication. And so I'm curious what you all's perspective or your company's perspective is on coordinating those loads so it's a kind of more of an integrated enrollment and participation experience for the customer in these utility-driven demand-side programs.
Yeah, good question. I think, well, Joel, we talked about this just like an hour ago, and maybe you want to share some of your experiences with those programs, or the customer's experience with some of those.
So I'll differentiate my answer based on the demand response programs that have been run in the past where the utility is controlling a thermostat or something along those lines. That always has a negative customer experience. We hear a ton of complaints about that because the loss of control starts to impact the customer lifestyle. Now, I think the other part of your question, which is really about getting the customer enrolled in some of these beneficial programs from each of the utilities or the local areas, and I'll speak for myself, and Megan can talk about her experience. Part of our solution as a kind of a large multi-geographic builder is we have to have some base solutions that we can apply across the entire country and then work with the local teams for those local programs. And keeping track of those local programs is a full-time job in just about every market because they're so differentiated as they go. And which programs get rolled out, I cannot tell you the number of times where I've been meeting with a local division and said, hey, are you guys taking advantage of this program? And it could be $1,500 a house to put in heat pump water heaters. And that local division had never known anything about it. And that local market, the utility's going, well, why is nobody enrolling in this program? Well, because no one even knew that it existed. And so that comes back to the point that I was making of being able to work more closely together with all the stakeholders and making sure the customer is getting those benefits of all of those programs allows a much better customer experience at the end. But I can tell you they also tend to get very complicated for the customer's perspective, and we have to work really hard to keep it simple for the customer. So they get the benefit, but they don't have to track 17 different items that they've got to make sure they enroll in and do those type of things.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that, remaining customer focused and reducing the complication as much as possible is vital for programs like that. And again, it's very market specific. We have some, baseline Beazer standards, which are very high standards, which I've talked about a lot and I won't bore you with, but we have those base standards, and then market by market, yes, we can evaluate different initiatives like that. I will say that we are building a lot of homes, and so our keeping track of something like that is a heck of a lot of work. And so between permitting and inspections and all the other things that our builders on the ground have to do every day, keeping track of those is difficult. So the more we can get help as an industry in understanding those opportunities and how we can comply would be really great for pushing this forward.
I'd love to just follow up. I think you both made excellent points, right? And what I heard a lot here is the complication, the challenges for the customer, the pain points, right? And I think this gets to your great question as well, right? This is the value of working with a company like Sunrun, right? There's others as well, right? But ideally, we are providing the expertise. My team of 10 is managing about 17 of these programs right now across the country. We know them in and out. We are usually the largest participant in the program as well, and so we have a seat at the table with the policymakers, with the legislators and the regulators who are actually designing these programs. And that is the advantage of it. So really what this should be, and it's a little bit different from what Sunrun generally does. Matt, we were talking about this last night at dinner, right? A lot of people think Sunrun is a B2C company, right? Going out and selling solar, right, and a storage system to individual customers, right? But what we're really doing here, right, is more of a B2B service, right? And so my team, for example, can partner with Joel or with Megan or other home builders, other entities, right, and help them to navigate all this complexity and simplify it. And if they want, we can not only inform them about it, we can actually execute on helping to educate customers and manage the customer's assets as well, so that it's as simple as what I described before of getting a notification on an app that says, hey, do you want to earn $20 tonight, or do you need all of your battery capacity? Yep. Right? We want to simplify it to that extent so that the customer doesn't need to know the hundreds of different programs that exist across the country.
Great answers. And hopefully that answered your question. And if not, feel free to throw a follow-up.
I'll let someone else ask a question. I can follow up later.
Thank you.
I'll just ask a quick question. I'm really interested in artificial intelligence, data centers, the demands that we're seeing coming for the grid. Sorry, I can be quiet now. Microsoft just paid to keep 3 Mile Island nuclear plant open. What do we look like on the grid in 5 or even 10 years? And we're seeing energy bills increase twice the cost of inflation right now. So what I'm saying is this something that is the new normal that we're approaching now? And maybe that's for you.
Yeah, I think you were pointing at me, so I'll start
Yeah,
with
it
that,
was you.
and then
Sorry, I've been up there. I know you can't see me. Yes.
Yeah.
The engineer.
Great question. So AI, data centers, those are very much the buzzwords right now. I don't think they're just buzzwords though, right? Whether you believe the load growth projections that are being put out there or you think they're slightly inflated, either way we are seeing electricity demand as a whole rise in an unprecedented way that it hasn't in decades. And so that's a new dynamic for the grid. Unfortunately, over the past decades, we haven't invested in building out the grid, specifically the transmission and distribution infrastructure, the wires to actually move the electricity, right? We can build generation. It's easy enough to, put a solar plant somewhere where there's open land. But, yes, I think the simple answer to your question, this dynamic is here to stay. And what I'm saying here is that virtual and distributed power plants are part of the solution to that, right? We are providing the same services as those large loads, but it's distributed. And so the fact that we have underinvested in our grid over the last several decades is somewhat mitigated because each of these generation devices, a battery in this case, is located at various nodes on the distribution grid, right? And that can all be orchestrated via software, right? And this is what we're doing to target it, right? And so at Sunrun, I get to work with large data center operators, some of which you named, right? To actually implement solutions where they are now approaching us and saying, hey, can you deploy a virtual power plant for us in this community, you know, broadly speaking, around where we want to develop a data center, because we went to the utility and the utility told us it's going to take 10 years, right? And they can't wait that long. Time is money to these people. And so we are doing that, right? We're in those discussions today. It's super exciting. Again, I'll reiterate what I said before. Virtual power plants are not the only solution. They are a solution. They're an arrow, right, in the quiver here that can help to solve these issues. And it all starts with you all, and Megan and Joel, right, putting batteries in new communities.
Yeah, and just one additional comment to that. I don't think we fully understand the impact of all of these data centers going in, primarily because in the meetings that I've had with, in our larger markets with the utilities, you don't see that demand on any of their current planning. Like you just don't see those things being planned for today. And so if you notice, a lot of these are coming in and they're like, well, we're gonna put the data center with their own microgrid almost structure set up around it to support it. And the utilities are still figuring out what's their obligation to support those areas if the microgrid has a failure or something along those lines. Are they still responsible for all of the maintenance of the lines that, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that I still think haven't fully been vetted out, because it's such a relatively new demand aspect of the economy that is coming online that most utilities haven't fully thought through.
We saw, I think recently Meta did a 7-year power deal with, I think, Duke Energy, or one of the big energy providers on the East Coast. 7 years, they are definitely looking ahead to what their energy demands are. And the way I see it, like, the East Coast, you know, a lot of has been largely protected from large escalating utility prices like California, but I think based on a utility right now, I think the data is it takes about 6 to 7 years at best to get a new gas turbine peaker plant, because global demand is so high. So you're 6 to 7 years out on new generation. Maybe other generation like solar or wind could come on faster, certainly not nuclear. So I think it's a long ways out to get this. So we're anticipating, you know, the outcome here to be probably faster utility escalation in a lot of places in the United States that haven't traditionally seen it increase as fast.
Can I add, just from a slightly different perspective, you know, maybe a little philosophical. All of this stuff is true, and ultimately the rise in utility rates due to all these data centers and AI things coming online is going to impact homeowners and home buyers and get them to really understand the value of batteries. But given that these things are coming online now, we need to do this now. So I think we always need to be thinking about, yes, what's the monetary benefit, but also, you know, people don't just buy on money. I mean, we talk, of course, a lot about affordability because it's very, very important, but you know, if I go buy a home, I really want a soaking tub, like, and I probably pay a lot more than it costs to put a soaking tub in, like, so, yeah, philosophically speaking. So I'm just, you know, yes, let's think about the grid impacts of everything that's coming online and what's coming in the future, but buyers aren't going to internalize that yet. So we really need to know now how to get folks to get into batteries. And I think part of that is understanding the resilience benefits, the just convenience benefits of grid arbitrage and all those little things like that, and really be able to tell that story.
Thanks. Any other questions for us? One more there. Yep.
Hey there, thanks for the thoughts so far. Do you have any thoughts on the sort of the scale of opportunity for home level storage compared to grid level or node level storage, such as batteries as a non-lines transmission option?
Yes, is my answer. Yes to all of the above, right? It's not an or, it's an and. Right? Homeowners need batteries even if there is massive utility scale deployment at the substation or at the transmission level. Why? Because homeowners want certainty that their power is going to stay on. They want to control what we were talking about before. They want to protect themselves from rising electricity rates, right? An individual battery at a home enables customers to have that choice. You also need the utility scale batteries. You need the substation, battery backups. So again, it is an and question, not an or, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. 2-3 years ago, when we had the EBA conference in Salt Lake City, we had a university professor there who just gave the current state of electrical generation in the U.S. as compared to the electrical demand. And it's so interesting because, to Chip's point, we need all of those solutions. We need individual house level solutions. We need community level solutions. We need grid infrastructure level solutions, just to keep up with the pace of demand and start moving things more towards renewable, sustainable energy solutions. We could not support an all electrification of the U.S. right now with any of the solutions as an individual, and even with all of them together, we're not on track to support all of the electricity demand that we need in the United States. And so that's the challenge. Is you're right. We have to have all of these solutions in place just to be able to keep up with our current demand, even without switching over to more renewable generation, just to keep on track with where we're headed as a country.
Okay, any other questions? Great. Well, we appreciate your time, Megan, Joel, Chip.
Thanks, Matt.
Batteries in every community.
Yes, as we're here to do what Matt asks us to do up here. So, no,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.